Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Beyond Profit Global Perspective. Donald Trump gave a State of the Union speech where he brought up the members of the U.S. men's hockey team to a standing ovation. Next thing you know, he's running around with Nicki Minaj on the not campaign trail. What is he trying to do anyway? Is he trying to focus people on a certain aspect of his agenda? Or is he maybe trying to distract people away from the agenda that he's got now that's making people mad? I mean, his approval ratings are way, way down. Does he think Nicki Minaj might change somebody's mind? Let's talk about it. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel. Please like, subscribe, share this video, and likewise, let's carry on the conversation. If there are things some insights that you have or some questions that you have for me, I'd love to carry on that conversation. But let's talk a little bit more about this. The first answer to the question is celebrities do matter, but probably not in the way that you would think in this situation. So my research suggests that they can be very influential in terms of policy advocacy. So if they start talking about an issue, especially if other people aren't talking about it, then that issue is going to go on steroids. They are better at gaining attention to an issue than most politicians are, even most presidents are. So it's just as far as shining a spotlight on those issues, they tend to be better, right? They are also often seen as more credible than politicians on issue advocacy, certain issues. Again, that there's a lot of variables. I could break it down for you, but just suffice it to say for now, that's another thing. The other thing is they can be quite persuasive on these issues too. So that's the way that I know that they do matter. But when you're talking about using somebody as a campaign surrogate or getting somebody to do an endorsement and have that make an impact, that's where our research isn't super strong. And to the extent that it actually is, it might even suggest that there's sort of a backlash effect that sometimes happens. During the 2024 campaign, I did some research with a couple of colleagues that looked at whether or not a Taylor Swift endorsement would cause a bump for Kamala Harris. And first of all, they had to be Swifties, right? If they didn't care about Taylor Swift, it doesn't matter. But among those Swifties, right, we broke them into categories. And what we discovered is that she had no net effect on Republicans because, they know who they're going to vote for, and Taylor Swift is not going to change their mind, right? No net effect for Democrats because Democrats are already, Swifties for Harris before Swift even made any kind of an endorsement, which left the people in the middle. And what we discovered among the people in the middle is they were actually less likely to vote Democrat with a Taylor Swift endorsement. Now, is that true for all celebrities all the time in all circumstances? I mean, dude, we would have to do a lot more research on a lot of other celebrities in order to try to prove that. Based on what we learned about Taylor Swift, I think that there's a lot of cognitive dissonance that happens when fans see the person that they like saying and doing things that may be out of step with what they think. And so I don't know absolutely that there's a persuasive effect that usually happens. I think it's more likely that people tend to separate those parts out. So I like Nicki Minaj, I don't like Donald Trump, so maybe I don't like Nicki Minaj's opinions, but I do like her music, so I'm gonna resolve this cognitive dissonance by putting things into different categories. It's a very common way that people deal with information that comes into their brain psychologically, and their brain doesn't like to accept dissonance, and so they sort it out. And I think this is a way that most people sort it out. And I think the same is true also with Taylor Swift. Like there's Swifties who are very conservative and they have to say, all right, well, maybe I don't like her politics, but I really like her music, so that's okay. And that's not to say she couldn't change anybody's mind. I mean, just because I don't have data doesn't mean it's not true. But I don't know that that's going to happen on a mass scale necessarily. I mean, maybe she gets a few people at the margins. And maybe the goal isn't to change anybody's mind. Maybe the goal is just to get people to pay attention. And if that's the case, then that's not a bad strategy for Trump. One of the things that I did discover in my research on issue advocacy is that celebrities aren't very good at persuading people on issues where they are already very set in and they tend to be polemic. Taylor Swift doesn't convince somebody to change their mind on gun control. She's going to be persuasive maybe in some other ways, but not in those ways. And that's, I think, the lens that you want to think about when you're looking at whether or not they make a difference in terms of campaign endorsements or being a surrogate, is that people already have their mind made up about Trump, about Trump's opponents. Nicki Minaj shows up and it's not going to change anybody's mind. Now, what it might do is it might draw attention, right? I think across the board, when celebrities show up to events, absolutely, they raise the profile of that event and make people start paying attention. But exactly what the effect is, other than trying to focus on an event like that, is a little bit unclear. The world is saturated with celebrities. If it's all about celebrities, why didn't Kamala Harris win? Well, yeah, maybe she had more celebrities, but Trump had a whole lot of celebrities too. So if we get into a match of who's got the most celebrities or who's got the best celebrities or whatever, it's a mess. Scientifically, you can't separate the variables out that way very well, right? You get so many of those things in there and it becomes a mess. I've got mine, you've got yours. Okay, you got Nicki Minaj, great. Well, I don't know, who do the Democrats have? Like loads of people. That's one reason why it's really hard to demonstrate that these things are going to make a difference in an election. You've also got to think about all of the other variables that are happening in an election. When people vote, they don't vote for Nicki Minaj, right? They're voting because inflation is high or their home prices are high. There's a lot of macroeconomic issues that are affecting people's behaviors and a lot of personal issues that are affecting people's behaviors. And what Nicki Minaj thinks isn't usually the first thing to come to mind. Again, that's one reason why I think they're much better when it comes to issue advocacy, because it's this usually something that people aren't paying that much attention to, and they start talking about it and they persuade people and they can make that happen, as opposed to a presidential campaign or any kind of a race between candidates where loads of people are covering it already and there's lots of people on both sides saying all kinds of things, and it's kind of a muddy mess. Whether or not bringing Nicki Minaj along is a distraction from a lot of the other things that are going on. I mean, I do think celebrities can be effective distractions. If I were Trump's advisor, I would tell him to focus on those things that matter the most to American people and try to formulate some reasonable answers to those concerns and just try to communicate that best he can. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with having Nicki Minaj stand up next to you. I mean, maybe more people will pay attention that day. There's a certain speech and he really wants to make it a big deal, and it might do a little bit of added attention or something. It might help with that. But yeah, I think really the kinds of things that matter to voters have more to do with, politics and life and not necessarily celebrity.